Well, look now, but we may be in showtime with cryptos. Bitcoin showing a huge spike. We're up 5% in this evening, and we're seeing similar action across the other cryptos. Today, we're going to go over what's going on here, a bit of a status update, and I will also go over the relationship and the correlations between the crypto space and the stock market. I don't believe that they follow each other perfectly. There's a lot of theories as to how the cash flow in the one market takes cash from the other. That's a zero-sum game. But we're going to see some inflection points. We're going to see where they coincide and where they don't. So we're going to start with Bitcoin because that is my biggest crypto and the largest indicator of sentiment. And since we hit a bottom on March 13th, we have what looks like a 5-wave pattern up, 3 waves down, and this could be the start of a 1-2. So this is a very good sign. When I put this thing together, use this Fibonacci extension tool here, it's got the look. We actually got a 0.618 extension for the subwave one, and we're presumably in the middle of a third wave of the third wave. So this thing should take us all the way up to possibly 42,610 before a sideways consolidation, bit of a pullback, and we should ultimately top out around 44,000 before another big pullback. So a lot of things have to go right before we can be confident in this pattern. We're going to shift over to Ethereum. The story is very much the same here. We don't have as pretty of a setup to the upside, but we can call this a 5 up, maybe a 3 waves down, possibly a flat correction. And we are skying on here. And I'm going to finally shift over to Dash because I've been mentioning that Dash seems to give us a very early indication of big shifts in sentiment amongst the altcoins. So where Dash goes, the altcoins seem to go. And this did not pull back and retrace as deeply over the past few weeks as most of the cryptos. As a matter of fact, we never invalidated anything in Dash. We have this first wave up potentially, and this looks like an A, B, C wave down, possibly a double zigzag because you got a zigzag down, zigzag up, and zigzag down again. Could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a couple of different interpretations. That would be a little bit more fitting of textbook corrected patterns. At any rate, we got possibly 5 up. That could be 5 up right there. I'll zoom up a little bit more than that, and possibly 3 waves down, and we may be in the same kind of thing. A couple other cryptos are showing similar patterns across the spaces. Bitcoin Cash is really moving. I'm going to pick on whatever has the highest percentages gained here. There's a few altcoins that are about the biggest one seems to be Bitcoin that's up the most. EOS is up over 3% as well. So is Polkadot, and this has that look. This does give me a little bit reason to pause because it could be an A, B wave down, and maybe a C wave up. We're definitely overbought, but that is expected when you see a third wave. Typically, your MACD extends really high up, and you'll have your fourth wave, and then you have a divergence where you go up, you have a higher high, but your MACD doesn't go up as high. So that's what's going on with the small picture. So let's see what happens. I do expect to see some kind of a change in the an inflection point across a lot of different asset classes. It seems like cryptos and equities, S&P 500, the Dow Jones Industrial, all the indices, they seem to correlate to some extent, as does energy. Whichever way these go, energy seems to go the opposite. So oil has been in quite a pullback over the past few days. I may have some setups in the near future on XLE and USO. When we look at XLE, we've just fallen off the cliff. This looks like a 3-wave pullback down here, ABC. So it is interesting how when the stock market rebounds, we see the energy sector pulling back. This is not always the case. People will tell you that fear drives commodities up. It does sometimes, other times it doesn't. So it's not a reliable correlation, to put it lightly. So big picture, we got our Bitcoin chart, which I'm going to pull up right here. So this is the daily chart. I pulled this up mainly to give us an overview of how the crypto sector has behaved relative to the stock market. So I have Bitcoin daily chart here, and we got our daily chart for the Dow Jones here. This is actually the 4-hour chart, but this is the index itself, so it doesn't trade overnight. Futures do, but we're going to stick with this. It's a bit cleaner, but this does follow Elliott Wave Theory, does follow a pattern. I'm doing the Dow Jones Industrial Average because it seems to fit the ratios very nicely to keep me from plagiarizing my mentor's work in the S&P 500. But alas, we have quite a top. Looked like we were about to keel over, and we did. If we look at the history of this thing, this was the everything crash in March of 2020, and you'll see that we had the exact same thing in cryptos. Again, Bitcoin is what I'm using to represent the crypto sector overall, and we have what I would could be a 1-2 here or a major 1-2 here. And in Bitcoin, I'm calling the top of the first wave about August 2020. Here we have a peak in June of 2020, as well as in September 2020. So more or less summer of 2020 is where we see the first wave peak for the bigger pattern that we have playing out. You have a relatively deep correction here. It could be a zigzag or a flat. Textbook standard, you got a 3-wave pullback here, B wave, and then a clear impulsive pattern down for our C wave. So this is what I'm calling a second wave, whether it's the larger degree second wave or the smaller degree second wave. I'm not totally clear, so we will know in retrospect. In hindsight, things are much easier to piece together. So we had that dip. This was in the fall of 2020, so November 2020. We had a similar dip a little bit earlier. It looks like Bitcoin started taking off before the stock market did. You see a bit of a blip here in November 2020. So this blip here in November for Bitcoin seems to more or less coincide with what we saw in the Dow. We had pullback that finished end of October, early November, and then we start taking off subwave 1-2, and we had another dip here in January 2021. See if we see anything like that there. January 2021, you do see a dip there. So there's a coincidence there, some correlation. Our Bitcoin peak did occur a little early relative to other cryptos. Almost every other crypto peaked in May of 2021. Bitcoin led, so it peaked in April of 2021, and we see a peak here in the May of 2021. So seems like at least the Dow Jones Industrial Average, its peak more or less coincide with what we saw in other cryptos such as Ethereum. Bring up Ethereum real quick just to show you what I mean. That was May 13th. I'm not going to go through all the other altcoins because they all seem to have peaked in May as well. We have a few exceptions. I'm not sure if Solana did or not. That thing just took off on a tear over the following summer. But that is what we had in Bitcoin. Then we had a very sharp pullback. This is the one that started to scare everybody. Middle of the summer, this was what I was looking at as the bottom of fourth wave at the time. And crazy enough, it has not invalidated. We have not had a lower low. So this still stands as our fourth wave down. Purple is still primary. So this bottom somewhere between May of 2021 and let's see, July of 2021. And when we look at that same time period, we did go through a correction. It doesn't look as severe or scary in the stock market itself, but this definitely looks like some form of fourth wave just because it is slow and sideways. It's grinding, and it happens after a blow off kind of a top. The MACD would also support that assertion. In addition, when you look at the fibs, depending on where you consider our 1-2 to be, this is probably too high to be a first wave top of any type, and probably not a fifth wave because, well, we went a good bit higher subsequent to that. After that point, we kind of had a very choppy diagonal-esque fifth wave. That's what I'm calling this. This whole thing could be the fifth wave, or this could be the fifth wave. When I say the fifth wave, it would be the fifth wave of this larger degree third wave, which is itself part of a much larger degree third wave than that. So that's a whole other thing. This is yet to be confirmed because a little further out. When we look at Bitcoin, we had so let's see here. Our bottom here was June 2021, and we had a peak in August 2021. And looks like we had the same thing here, what I'm calling possibly a third wave or first wave or an A wave. There's just so many interpretations. There's a coincidence there. Correlation, September 2021, we saw a dip, and we saw the exact same thing there. So this is where both cryptos and stocks start to almost mirror each other. They seem to be following the same inflection points. We had another peak in November of 2021, and we saw the exact same thing. That was a big peak in Bitcoin. And the rest of the cryptos. Some of the cryptos did not have a secondary peak here. Other ones had a very high peak. It just depends. Some of them had a more classic V wave. We didn't have the expanded flat look like we do in Bitcoin. In the Dow, you could consider this a corrective wave up for the November one. Could be 5 waves up, could be an ABC. And if this whole thing is a diagonal, you'd expect these to be ABCs, ABCs, ABC, 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 and ABC to finish it, which is what you expect. 3-wave structures for the subwaves of each of the waves within this 5-wave ending diagonal. And after a diagonal, especially an ending diagonal, you tend to fall off a cliff. That's exactly what we saw in the stock markets. We hit our peak on January 5th. I believe cryptos did the exact same thing. They had a peak on January. There we go. This was actually a kind of a dead cat bounce, if you will. If you guys recall, in my updates, I was calling this a bottom December 4th. And it looked like we had a nice rally ahead of us, and then everything changed right around Christmas into the New Year's weekend. It was a little bit less vague in the Dow. I think there was some projections showing that would go a little bit higher, especially because there's a big fib resistance here at 37,613. We didn't make it there. So bit of a truncation. We don't love it, but seeing that this is an ending diagonal, it's not that surprising at all. And we had a sharp pullback, and many people bought the dip, including myself, at least in stocks. And I was actually calling for buying the dip in cryptos, but I was looking for a bounce and a lower low. We got that in Bitcoin, but well, we didn't get another lower low. You can see that we have a bit of a double bottom here. And so this bottom here is on January 24th. That is exactly when the stock market hit one of its bottoms. So in retrospect, this is the A wave of this pullback. Then we had a B wave fake out rally. That's what this is. And we had a bit of a B wave bounce, possibly, because it does look like 3 waves up. However, we didn't get a lower low like we did in the stock market. So after that, we clearly had a lower low. There's no way that this is a 1-2 because we broke the pattern. So this looks like a classic A, B, C pullback pattern here. And I would cross my fingers that we're done. There is a setup that we go a little bit more because we didn't quite hit the exact support 32,107 for the Dow. And well, the picture's the same for cryptos. There's not any other more, how do I put it, more decisive clue here, anything more discreet than that. This could be a 1-2, 1-2 in Bitcoin and the rest of the cryptos. It could be an A, B, C and something coming down. The thing is, though, we've been so oversold. We've been in this pullback for so long that typically you'd expect a surprise to be to the upside. I'm hearing lots of people calling for end of the world, the sky is falling. There's a lot of negative sentiment, which is typically what you see at the bottom or towards the bottom. There will be some denial if this does start to take off from here. And I expect the same thing in the stock market. So as far as we've seen over the past 3 to 6 months, maybe even over the past year or two, there's been a lot of correlation between equities and cryptos. How does this help us as Elliottians? It can help us at least give a little bit more of a hint as to the direction, what the structure is. Sometimes you have something that looks like maybe 5 waves up, maybe in cryptos, but in the stock market, it doesn't look like that. It could give us another alternate pattern to use that we can hedge appropriately. It can just give us a bit more clarity that we may be lacking in cryptos, for example. So again, we don't rely on correlations, but it can give us a clue. Are we in the 2nd wave retrace? Are we in the 4th wave retrace? It's an ending diagonal, but it's far from concrete. So I'll probably have more coverage on ETFs, other equities, things like that, maybe even the Dow. Subscribe so you don't miss those. We're going to keep an eye on this thing. This spike is looking pretty dang awesome right now in cryptos. So see what happens. Till next time, thank you for watching and happy trading.